Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Dynamite Rice. That's right, this recipe is inspired by the popular Dynamite Sushi Roll, and we're going to use some of the same elements featured in that to create something that's not only gorgeous and delicious, but is also one of the easiest, most foolproof ways to cook seafood ever. So if you enjoy seafood but are afraid to cook it, this is definitely the technique for you, especially if you enjoy sushi. Speaking of which, to get started, the first thing we need to do is make a batch of our favorite rice. And my favorite variety for this dish would be a medium grain called Cal Rose, which we need to rinse before we use it, which I did off camera. And then once we add the right amount of water, we will bring this up to a simmer on high heat. And then once simmering, we will back it down to low, and we'll cover it, and we'll let it cook for 20 minutes, at which point we'll turn off the heat and let it sit for 10 minutes before we fluff. And the reason there's no times popping up on the screen is because you're going to have to follow the package directions for the rice you use. But anyway, the point is we're going to cook 1 cup of rice to the best of our abilities. And while that's simmering and or resting, we can go ahead and season our rice vinegar, which we'll do with some white sugar, plus some salt. And once those have been added, all we have to do is stir this until everything's dissolved. And it's the addition of this seasoned vinegar that turns plain cooked medium grain rice into sushi rice. Although in fairness, there's a little more to it than that. But anyway, once that's mixed up, we'll set it aside. And we'll go back and check our rice, which has been simmering for 20 minutes. And once it has, I'm going to turn off the heat and let it sit for 10 minutes before we can move on to the next step. And while we're waiting, we can pull together a couple more ingredients that we're going to add to the rice, which would be some toasted sesame seeds that we simply toast in a dry pan as usual. And then I also like to add a little bit of bonito flake, which is a very thinly shaved dried fish, which if you've never had before is one of the most flavorful ingredients you can ever use. And then we're also going to add a little bit of nori seaweed, which come in these sheets. And yes, that's exactly what we use to wrap sushi. And what I'll do is roll this up nice and tight, and then use a pair of scissors to trim fine ribbons off the end. And if you live in the right places, you can actually buy it already shredded, but this only takes a minute, so I'm going to do it this way. And that's it. Once we have that prepped, we'll go back and check our rice, which is rested with the heat off for 10 minutes. And we'll go ahead and pull that off the heat. And we will drizzle over our vinegar mixture. And then we'll take a fork and give this a proper fluffing, which means we're just trying to break up the grains of rice without mixing and mashing this into a paste. And besides distributing that vinegar, this also releases a tremendous amount of steam and basically stops the cooking process, which is kind of a big deal, since we are going to cook this again. And then once our rice is all broke up, we'll go ahead and transfer that into a casserole dish that I have very lightly greased with sesame oil, which will keep our rice from sticking and add a beautiful fragrance. And we will gently spread it out, being very careful not to pack it too much. And then what we'll do once we get it to this point is stop, and we will scatter some sesame seeds over the top, along with the bonito flakes I'm just going to crumble over, and sort of break up, rubbing them with the tips of my fingers. And then last but not least, we will scatter over our seaweed, if we're using it. Okay, the seaweed and the bonito are optional, but if you tasted this dish with them and without them, you would definitely consider them mandatory. But anyway, you decide. I mean, you are, after all, the Jimmy J.J. Walker of making food you'll become obsessed with like a stalker. And then once all that's been applied to the top, we will take our fork again and very gently kind of poke and stir that around. And we'll mix that into the rice as evenly as we can. Oh, and if you're thinking, why didn't he just scatter that stuff over evenly and then not stir it? Wouldn't that have been faster and easier and better? Well, yes, in hindsight it would have. So I'll do it that way next time. And in the business, we call that the learning process. And that's it. The sushi rice component of this dish is done. And we can move on to the prepping of our spicy mayonnaise, which not surprisingly starts with mayonnaise, to which we will add a little bit of soy sauce, as well as a little bit of toasted sesame oil, and then way more than a little bit of sriracha, or of course the Asian-style hot sauce of your choice. And then what we'll do is go ahead and give that a good mix, at which point it's ready for our seafood, which in my case is going to be some beautiful bay scallops, as well as some raw peeled and deveined shrimp that I cut in half-inch pieces, so as to try to match the size of the scallops. And once we've added whatever seafood we're going to use, we'll go ahead and take a spoon and mix this up. And that's it. Once that's mixed, we'll go ahead and apply it over the top of our rice. And by the way, this will work with literally any fish or seafood you like. In fact, the chef that popularized this dish, a Mr. Roy Choi, actually does it with uni, which are the reproductive glands of a sea urchin. I know that does sound good. So really feel free to use anything you want. But anyway, we'll go ahead and spread that out. And then for one final touch before this goes in the oven, I'm going to generously sprinkle the top with cayenne to make our dynamite rice a little bit more explosive. And that's it. It is now ready to transfer into the center of a 400-degree oven for about 20 minutes or so, by which time our seafood should be just about cooked. At which point I like to switch the oven to the broil setting so we can go ahead and finish off the top with some direct intense heat. But be careful, don't burn it. Right, we only want to do this for about a minute or two, or till it's beautifully browned and looks like this. And that's it. To garnish this, I like to drizzle a little more sriracha over the top in some kind of decorative and or random pattern. And then we'll also do maybe one more application of toasted sesame seeds, followed by some freshly and thinly sliced green onions. And that's it. Our dynamite rice is ready to detonate. So let me go ahead and grab a spoon and dig in and eat right out of the baking dish. And that, my friends, was just absolutely incredible. And no, I'm not going to say the flavors explode in your mouth, since that cliche is just too easy. But this really is an umami bomb in every sense of the word. And it's always nice to have everything in one spot. Right, we have our perfectly cooked seafood and our perfect sushi rice side dish, along with all the sauce you could possibly want or need, which is why I'm totally fine eating this out of the dish. But if we do go ahead and plate this up, I think it would be absolutely perfect next to a chilled Japanese-style spinach salad. But if you don't have that, and I don't, I think any kind of crisp green salad would work, just to help balance out all this spicy richness. And yes, I made this very spicy, but you don't have to. It's not going to bother me any. But anyway, that's it. What we're calling dynamite rice. I just love everything about this. And it really is, as Jimmy J.J. Walker liked to say, fantastic. Wait a minute, what was his catchphrase? Amazing. No, that's not it either. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is this really was dynamite. Which is why I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.